Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Kat. I'm German and I write in English, and I also have an academic background in philology and linguistics, and so I decided to make a video series on how to write bilingual characters. So I already made 2 videos on this topic. One where I talked about definitions and gave you some guiding questions, and 2, which was last week's video, where I talked about the don'ts of writing bilingual characters. So since I don't want to be a negative Nancy, I also of course want to give you some more constructive things and some do's and some good things and strategies that you should do when you write bilingual characters. Anyway, this was a very long intro, and now let's jump into the video, which is just me talking some more. Anyway. The first do that you should do when you write bilingual characters is you should be willing to invest some serious research. I probably don't have to tell you this because you're already willing to do your research since you're watching this video, but languages are just a huge part of a character's identity. So if you choose to write a character that speaks a different language from you, that's a very serious commitment, and you definitely have to be willing to invest a lot of research. This research should include just figuring out more about what it means to be bilingual in the first place. Talk to bilinguals, listen to how they speak, look at how they interact, and also ask yourself some guiding questions that I talked about in my first video. So I will link that up here and also down in the description box. Because bilinguals are people, and people are very different, and there are many different ways of living with bilingualism or getting to be bilingual. So you should definitely know your character well and understand them inside and out. I personally think you should also invest some research in getting to know the minority language or the second language of your character, just because it's usually not a very straightforward thing, and you can get a lot of things wrong if you don't have any idea about the second language that your character is speaking. I think it can also be really helpful to just understand more about language structure and linguistics in general, because you might have a very hard time to actually be able to contrast the 2 languages if you don't even know basic terminology such as what's a verb, what's a case system, or what are phonetics. English, honestly, is a very regular language that is grammatically not very complex, believe it or not. So you will have different languages that have a lot of things that you will never encounter in English. And in my opinion, if you write bilingual characters, you need to prepare yourself a bit for that. Luckily for you, if you write in English, the internet will just be full of resources, because most of the planet is trying to learn how to speak English. So there will be countless videos of people who do accent training. Mostly those will be how to get rid of your accent, but there are also excellent ways of finding out what accent those kind of speakers usually have. Basically, if someone tells you how to get rid of a German accent when speaking English, you will thereby also find out what defines a German accent in English. So yeah, the internet is your friend, at least in this respect. The next do is ask native speakers for help. So I just said the internet is your friend, but it's a snake friend. It's a false friend at times. So don't rely on the internet too much, and just definitely take the time to run your work by some native speakers, by some bilingual people. They will definitely be able to catch mistakes or just even if they're not really mistakes, just to identify some things that don't really add up and that are maybe a bit odd. Also, remember to give these native speakers context. So ideally, they would be your beta readers, but even if it's just a few lines, people need context in order to evaluate language, because language is a very complex thing and there can be 1,000 different translations of even a short sentence depending just on the context, and they will only be able to give you feedback, whether the language sounds natural or whether it sounds a bit off, when they know exactly where this phrase occurs. The next do is, do remember that there is an incredible amount of linguistic variety. Even within each language, there is just a lot of diversity. You wouldn't imagine an 80-year-old Scottish grandma to sound exactly like a 10-year-old boy from Australia, even though they both speak English, right? And the same goes for other languages. Even smaller languages still have a lot of diversity inside of them, and the diversity doesn't only depend on the region that they're from, but also what age they are, what time period you're writing about, what socio-linguistic status they have. Everybody speaks different. There are so many different factors that define how a person speaks, and you shouldn't forget about that. This brings me to the next do, which is do learn more about the culture of the language as well. So I don't need to go into too much detail here. We all probably know that language is just closely tied to culture and that they can never be separated. So it definitely helps if you know a bit about the culture. The next do is just to be consistent. People speak in a very consistent way usually, so don't start out with your character having a very strong accent and making just super many grammatical errors, and then halfway through they kind of transition to speaking like perfect English. I mean, people's language skills usually change over time. They might improve or they might forget the language if they haven't spoken it in a long while. But this is a very lengthy process, so just be consistent. The next do is make it relevant to the story. So I already spoke about this a bit in my don'ts video, which I will link up here and also down in the description box if you haven't seen it yet. But basically I said there that you shouldn't constantly remind us that this character is bilingual or that they are struggling with this new language that they're learning. It can come off as a bit cheesy or weird. Like everything you put in your story, it should be part of the story and it should be relevant and add to it and not just be kind of a gimmick. And the last do is do remember to just treat your characters like people. I mean, this is basically just a summary of all my do's and don'ts. If you treat your characters like people, like they're well-rounded, if you ask yourself questions about their backstory, about how they relate to the languages that they speak, about how other people react to when they speak certain languages the way they do, and just generally what motivates them, what scares them, how they're likely to cope when they don't know a word, you will just figure out how they use their languages in kind of an organic way, and it will feel natural and it won't feel awkward. So just ask yourself if this is how real people would speak and if this is how your character would speak specifically, and then I think many things will fall into place. Alright, and my last do is do watch my next video where I talk about code switching, because code switching or language mixing as it's sometimes known is something that many people get horribly wrong. So this is definitely an important topic to talk about when we talk about writing bilingual characters. Subscribe to my channel so you don't miss that video, and you can also hit the little notification bell icon, and this way you will get an email when I upload my video and you won't miss it. Thank you so much for watching. You can follow me on all of my other social media if you want to. I will link everything down below. My handle is @catsperlingbooks pretty much everywhere except for Twitter, where I'm @ksperlingbooks. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!